Before we get started, we really want to share with you our plans to take the podcast on the road. This means filming on-the-ground experiences in the U.S. and internationally, with in-the-field, face-to-face video interviews. It's an exciting yet ambitious undertaking, and we know we cannot do it without your help. If you feel inspired to join us in making this a reality, simply head over to the donate link in this episode's description. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support and your commitment to helping us share more of these wild stories and amazing people. A friend of the podcast for sure. We've had him on multiple times, talking not only about his history in the wolf introductions in Yellowstone and in Idaho, but his previous two books. And he is now authored a third, which just hit bookshelves, I believe, last week or the week before. So if you haven't realized, Carter Niemeyer has written another one. It's called The Other 10 Wolves, a Yellowstone Backstory. And we're going to get into a lot of this today. And I welcome him from his home in Idaho. And Carter, it's great to always talk to you. How you doing today?
Well, thanks for the invitation to speak with you. We're doing good here. It's a beautiful sunny day and feels like temperature is going to get maybe in the 70s. Our trees are blossoming, so spring is on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely here in California as well. We got a nice little heat wave going on here, but hopefully it'll cool off a little bit. I'm about halfway into the book, and you are, as your friend Doug Smith says, I believe in one of the comments that he wrote, that you are an incredible storyteller, and this is on par with Wolfer and Wolfland. I want to ask you initially, before we really dive into the story and the backstory behind this book, why now to write this story 30 years after reintroduction? What was the drive for you, or what was something itching in the back of your brain that said, hey, this story needs to be told?
Yeah, it's a story I've wanted to tell throughout my career. Had to get retired before I started writing books. And then it was interesting how it's a little known story. And some wolf advocates who I've known for years, decades, have all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, called me up or texted me or made contact, said, did you know that there were 10 more wolves that were in Yellowstone besides the original reintroduced wolves from Canada? I said, yeah, I caught them. And, it's my God, I didn't know this, And I started on the manuscript about 3 years ago. And then, I had a couple of book ideas. So I got this one written, kind of put it on the back burner. Then I went to a Idaho Conservation League meeting a couple of years ago at Redfish Lodge. Had breakfast with a fellow I'd never met in my life, and we got talking, and he was talking about my books, and name's Linwood Laffey, who's another one of my editors for this book. And we got talking, and he says, gosh, why don't you do some more books? I said, well, editing costs, all these investments. And he says, well, if you got a book and you want to work on, I used to do this kind of work, and I can help you edit it, and I'll make you a really good deal. And so then I went home all excited and started working on it again. And then my wife, she's my primary editor. And then when she saw me reinvigorated again, she says, well, I got to help you. We got to make this thing good. It's got to be as good as the others. So it was this process. And then lo and behold, didn't really plan it, bring the book out on the 30th anniversary of Wolf Reintroduction, but it all came together at the same time. So it worked out great. The book came out exactly when people are celebrating 30 years of wolf recovery.
And it's a great token to the work that yourself and others have done. And we've spoken about that at length with our previous conversations with you about the amount of work that was done and the heavy lifting to make this reintroduction possible, and ultimately a success to recolonize and reintroduce wolves into the northern Rockies. When we get into this specific story, this takes place, I believe, sometime after the initial reintroduction in 1995, correct? So we already have wolves on like that have been reintroduced. And now this situation sort of pops up as you need other wolves, I guess, to supplement the population. Give everybody a little bit of the backstory about why these 10 wolves came into the picture.
Well, people have to understand my job. I was the wolf management specialist beginning about 1990. So I'm the guy where the rubber meets the road, working across agency lines. I was on call, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, from Park Service. Everybody involved in wolf recovery were calling on me because I was kind of the go-to guy that needed to do the investigations on behalf of wildlife services, who were the predator control branch. And we had an agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service to help. And eventually I became the coroner, dog catcher, principal crime investigator having to do with wolves. And so this particular story tells about one particular wolf pack, because see, from years prior, during this time and months immediately following this story that I'm telling, I was constantly on the road dealing with wolf conflicts. And so we were determining wolf problems here and there. Wolves were being caught, wolves were being relocated. The outcomes were poor, wolves were dying. And when this particular situation developed, we were into wolf reintroduction, and it was coming up in 1996. So I had my hands full. And the unique thing about this, and why the story I think is unique, is that this particular wolf pack came along at a time where we made mistakes. Wolves had died. We really didn't know what we were doing. We were just learning ourselves. This was way before, non-lethal practices, and we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So this situation here and the decisions made kind of set a precedent. We were going into uncharted waters. Are we going to try and solve this problem, kill some wolves, relocate some, and destroy them too? Or are we going to do something different?
When you look at this going back, so when the team or yourself are looking at this specific pack, I guess, was there any discussion around traits or characteristics that you're looking for to supplement the reintroduced wolves that you already have? Or is this specifically a situation that comes up and you guys sort of jump into action to, like you say, save these wolves or try and relocate in a way that's going to help them persevere? What's the reason behind these specific ones in particular? And just for those that may have already purchased the book and are reading about it, this is the Sawtooth Pack, but not the one with Jim and Jamie Dutcher. That was the one in the captive pack that was in Idaho. These are different wolves. So go ahead. Sorry, Carter.
Yeah, well, from the time we're talking about wolf recovery till the time I became involved in it in the late 80s, early 90s, I guess we considered every wolf valuable. We were trying to keep them alive any way we could. So I won't say we were looking for a special kind of wolf or something unique and different. We were just looking for the genetics that we could preserve from every individual wolf we could save. And so this particular situation, these wolves had an opportunity to be saved, and we had an opportunity to try another experiment and do something different.
Got it. And describe to the role of, I know there was obviously this specific pack, and I believe the the lead male and female were depredating on livestock, and it was around, I believe, Nez Perce land. So there were a couple different factors that went into this relocation. So how did, when you guys, because I'm in the beginning parts of the book and like almost halfway through, and there's parts where you're describing about darting wolves, you were 5 for 5 or something, and you're going into this, like you said, as sort of a novice. What what were the agreements, I guess, that were made at this specific point to say we're going to give these wolves a chance with the Nez Perce, the government? Like, how did those sort of conversations go?
Okay, so I got to back you up a little bit here.
Go ahead,
These wolves,
back me up.
these wolves were located along the Rocky Mountain front, about an hour
Got it.
drive north of Helena, Montana, near the little town of Augusta. So there was no Nez Perce land involved.
No Nez Perce. Okay, got it.
The closest tribe was the Blackfeet Nation, which would have been 150 miles north of this location. So these wolves were settled on private property, but it was checkerboarded with a lot of public lands, and then we're right along the boundary of the Bob Marshall Wilderness. So you got several large ranches, historically cattle ranches, and these wolves seem to prefer staying out of the wilderness. When they started to den and have pups, they ended up on private land. And again, I mentioned at this time in wolf recovery, people would say, well, why don't you do this and this and this to save them? Coexistence, non-lethal measures. For the most part, they didn't exist. We didn't have any money committed to doing any non-lethal, nor did we even have the tools we have today. So usually its response was case by case, incremental, following a 1988 wolf control guidelines. So we just try to prolong the situation without letting it get out of control. And under the guidelines, we had to do something, 2 strikes and you're out, which meant we could go lethal. But we also had the prerogative on a case-by-case incremental basis of trying different things. In this case, we decided to put together a capture plan and see if we could salvage some of these alive. And this is how it became connected to the Yellowstone recovery effort, and actually became related to the wolf reintroduction, it turned out.
Talk about the guidelines that were sort of in place, because it seemed as though there were multiple escapes by these wolves once they were in the containment pens. And I remember and always correct me if I'm wrong, they built the big enclosure pens so that when you relocated the wolves into Yellowstone, I know especially, they had time to sort of assimilate or to get acclimated to their new environment. With the Sawtooth Pack, as they were ultimately called, there was a lot of escape and a lot of recapture. Talk about some of those guidelines that were in place, because it seems as though there was a lot of buffer or bumpers in place, if you're bowling, to sort of like, okay, they escaped and we're going to bring them back. And there was what were sort of the challenges with this specific pack in that instance, just to keep them in the acclimation pens to start?
Well, again, I seem to stutter and get stymied here in how to answer you.
Sure.
It's complicated because I was this one guy running around
Right.
dealing with all the different wolf problems. I say in the book, I'm on speed dial with Ed Bangs with the Fish and Wildlife Service after the wolf reintroductions, 95 and 96, going into the park. Then I was on speed dial with Doug Smith and Mike Phillips. And it was my willingness and being available as a resource to respond to all these calls constantly. Hey, Carter, we got wolves killing here, we got wolves killing there. And then in Yellowstone, a couple of these wolves developed a technique, they climbed the fence. I mean, they, against all odds, using their teeth and their paws. So the next thing I start getting calls from Doug Smith, Carter. I mean, we got wolves that got out. Carter, they're digging under the apron. They're trying to break their buddies out. Carter, they left the park. You gotta help me, man. And so yeah, and it was my willingness. I wanted to do this. I guess just as simply, we could have reacted to them once they left the park and got in conflict with livestock. Just kill them, forget about it. But I volunteered to go, and I was, I'm going to say, between 100% and 99.9% successful. Every time Ed Bangs and Doug Smith and others called me, I was able to get the wolves back for them. So I had to engineer these capture plans. I had to call up pilots, fixed wing pilots. I knew helicopter pilots. When can you get together? I need you now. And so we just throw these capture events together by the seat of our pants again.
When you reflect back on just that, the willingness that you talk about, but also you having your hands in so many different things, do you at times wonder how you were able to pull some of this stuff off because you were on speed dial with so many different folks?
Yeah, I get overwhelmed. People know from my other books, I've kept journals. I've got records of everywhere I've gone, who I've talked to, and every wolf capture. I've got them cataloged just for my own interest. And I just absolutely get tired when I read my field diaries, because this included Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. There was just no break. And you plan to, if you want to go elk hunting and suddenly get a call, Carter, forget it. We need you down here. And so some of these captures overlapped my elk hunting season. And it's like, I was, when I was in those boots doing these jobs, it was like, good God, I need a break. But I always went. I was always willing to go out and do it again.
When you're getting these calls and you're thinking about, I guess, some of the things when you look back also, because I think in some of the things like what are some of the missteps, or what are some of the things that and this is, we're still in the beginning stage of this, so they're in the pens. What are some of the missteps or things that you might have, from your perspective, done maybe slightly differently with this pack in terms of capture or anything like that? Or did you think it went the way it should have with the tools that were available at the time?
Well, it turned out this was the first situation where we had two breeding females in a pack. It's not common, but it's not uncommon. But this was the first situation. And I learned over time, maybe back then we didn't have it totally figured out, but we learned over time that when you have a pack that gets larger and larger and there's more mouths to feed, more pups to take care of, the adults, I think, I wouldn't even call it desperate. They become opportunists. They're looking for flesh. They're looking for food on the hoof. And if you got to grab a calf or a sheep or something, that's what they do. And once this gets started, in my experience, it's really difficult to get a pack to stop killing. And in this case, this pack probably, we never were sure how many, but between 14 to 20 wolves in this pack. And looking back and here forward, I can tell you the outcomes are never good when you have a pack that size that gets started. So I don't know back then even if we could have turned it around or had any other outcome than the one we had.
I mean, yeah, because you've chronicled with us and on other podcasts and through your books about just the trials and tribulations of these types of, situations being called out and trying to decipher in your mind if there was a depredation, was it wolf related? Was it disease? Was it all these other things? So in the back of your mind, you're trying to balance all this along with trying to preserve not just this pack, but other wolves that came through and did these things. When you guys were at the point, if you can speak on it, was there once they were in the acclimation pen to a degree, was there a strategy in terms of like I know they need time to acclimate. Was there a specific time of year you guys wanted to release them and make sure that they had the best chance of survival? I know there was a larger pack. What was the reasoning there in terms of when you guys wanted to release and where, if possible? Or was it just sort of we collar them and see what happens with this pack in particular?
Well, again, I'm the messenger and the
Right.
author of the book.
Mhm.
Ed Bangs made a lot of the big decisions on behalf of the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Mhm.
And the wolves once I caught them and handed them off, then they became the responsibility of the Fish and Wildlife Service, who delivered them to the park,
Mhm.
which then the wolves were the responsibility of the Park Service.
Mhm.
And so it was Mike Phillips and Doug Smith who had to decide how to get the most bang for their buck with these wolves. And it involved, augmenting the population, number one, and then what are we going to use? We can just put some pups in a pen. This is not going to be good. So they decided to put surrogate wolves with the pups so that they had some kind of adult, I wouldn't call it supervision, but they needed some kind of socialization. And then it turns out, I think that when they intended to release them, then we get into one of the severest winters that Yellowstone had had in years, which postponed things for a number of reasons. So I don't know if I can answer the strategy for Doug and Mike, but they were trying to look at what they had to contend with and when the best times were to release them and hope that they would survive.
When we're moving into this situation, and I want to talk too a little bit about because you have such a good candor with many groups of people, and clearly, like the reason I think you were on speed dial, and you probably know this, is you can just talk to so many different groups of folks and be able to sort of walk that through line of coexistence at the time that we don't know about today. What made that easy? I don't want to even say easy. What were some of the like just what did you have innately as a trait to be able to talk the temperature down in the room? Because I think that's what I've gathered through all these books is you just have a way about you of talking to people and making the situation not as heightened as it needs to be. And obviously things get heated in the wolf space, but you always seem to be able to, whether you know it or not, at least from my perspective, make the temperature cooler. What is that about you that you've seen over the course, like writing this book in particular, that you've seen or you remembered certain situations that you were able to talk down situations?
Well, I'm that kind of guy, number one. I don't walk away from conflict. So I'm willing to walk into a rancher's home and at their invitation and try to, just establish a relationship. Here's who I am, here's what I do. And sometimes it results in a cup of coffee and just getting acquainted. And then I think you have to prove yourself to the people that you're talking to and responding to. They want to see what do you know and what can you deliver. So I'm always honest. I mean, you've got to be absolutely honest. Sometimes so honest that it might seem to work against you, but I found that being honest with people earns trust. And if they think you're square shooter, they'll give you latitude to try things, um, watch and see. And I make myself available and give them your phone number and all, all this good thing. But it's always been a challenge that I enjoyed. And I enjoy people, if they treat me civil and, we just don't have some adversarial uh, relationship. But 99.9% of the people I've met in my job are really good folks, salt of the earth people. And they got problems and emotions run high. If you act calm, be calm, and just take it step by step. I found that in my career, it's worked almost always. And then push comes to shove and hard decisions have to be made. Um, you follow through with what you said you're going to do. You don't waffle and you don't kick the can. That's one of my old sayings, kicking the can down the road. You just can't do that with people, I don't believe. It's when the time comes and hard decisions are made, you got to follow through whatever those decisions are.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes you the person that you've been, at least, knowing you for a few years that I've known you. It's because of that honesty and that integrity that stories like these are able to be told. Go because I don't think we covered this. Describe the area, Tukaj. You said these wolves were from northwestern Montana, correct? Like north of, like you say, north of Helena?
Yeah, about an hour drive north of Helena, Montana.
Describe the environment that they're in, because give people sort of a snapshot of what this environment looks like that they're clearly surviving in and denning and all this stuff. Where are the sawtooth pups in relation, if people can envision on a map in Montana where they're denning down and what they're doing?
Well, I encourage people to read about the Rocky Mountain front. It's where the prairie suddenly comes up to 3,000-foot sheer cliffs and the Continental Divide. So you kind of go from wheat fields into this very sudden, gradual foothill situation, and then into a steep rise into very beautiful. It's the southern tip of the northern Rocky Mountains, that run right on up into Canada. It's one of the most gorgeous places on earth in the lower 48. It's full of grizzly bears. It's the same, it's that connects to Glacier National Park. And then to the west of Augusta, Montana, where these wolves were, is the Bob Marshall Wilderness and the Scapegoat Wilderness. So it's some of the most beautiful land you'll ever see in your life. And it's just teeming with wildlife. And those ranchers up along that country, for the most part, really enjoy wildlife. Where these wolves took up residence, that particular ranch, I mean, they didn't even want you howling at the wolves. If they don't want you to howl at them in Yellowstone, we really don't want you howling them. So, I mean, these people really cared. They weren't wolf lovers, but really respected the land and the resident wildlife that lived there. So as a pack of wolves, I don't think they could have picked a nicer piece of real estate, full of white-tailed deer, and another landmass right next to the front there is a 20,000-acre elk range. That's where all the elk in that whole region come down in winter on that game range up there. And that's kind of where the story starts in the book, on that beautiful range.
And it seems like, as you mentioned and as you described, it's a perfect place, other than denning close to the ranch there, for them to be, to be and to survive. As a media, I mean, because you are, in my mind, you're a mediator of people too. Do you? Because we discussed about you crossing and talking with different groups of folks. Do you do you think in this process, because the folks that own this ranch were so keen about, the wildlife and, grazing on the wild land, that this made this situation a little bit more easier to navigate as opposed to if the temperature was at a high pitch from the start?
Yeah, well, all the folks up there were neighbors, and where this particular ranch was very large, and I think there's more money behind the ranch than just livestock they graze. But they were also thoughtful neighbors. They said, we're willing to tolerate some loss, we're willing to put up with some inconvenience, but they were quick to say some of our neighbors can't afford to be that benevolent. So if our neighbors have problems with these wolves, that's a whole nother ball game. And you do what you have to do to look out for our neighbors. So it was a nice setting where the neighborly attitude made it a lot easier to work than if there was a lot of antagonism up there.
Yeah, and that always seems to be the way through, is if you can find neighborly or compromise or find a middle ground, it always seems to make a difficult task a little bit more easy when you have multiple folks on either side sort of encouraging each other to make this happen in a way that's going to be positive for all folks involved. So, is there a wolf out of the ones that you captured and trapped and brought over that stuck in your mind, or a story from the beginning part of this that sticks with you, um, and you remember vividly, because obviously you kept incredible journals and you've written these books, but from this pack in particular, was there one or two wolves that stuck out for you in terms of tracking and capturing and relocating, or their journey overall?
Well, one of the wolves that was a complicated adventure and couldn't begin to write about it. My editors put me on a lean diet, here, because I could write a whole book about one of the wolves, like Wolf 68. It was a female from that Sawtooth capture we took down as a puppy, and many months later, after the wolves were released in the park, and wolves went helter skelter everywhere, and I remember getting a call about a wolf that was killing sheep along with grizzly bears and coyotes down in Green River in Wyoming. And I'm adding a lot here you're not going to read in the book, but so I jump in my truck and I'm heading for the Cora area, Pinedale, Wyoming. And on the way down, I meet a government trapper who's on a payphone, and stop and talk to him. And he had just released a grizzly bear that had attacked his truck and tried to climb in his window, and he had to shoot and scare the bear away, which left paw prints on the door of his government truck when we were standing there visiting. And then I went on down to that Pinedale area and ended up going back into the wilderness, first by pickup, then took an ATV up, stayed with a sheep herder, listened to him tell me about a wolf dog. And at the time, I had no idea what I was going after. So I set some traps, slept in my teepee up there, got up in the morning, went out, and lo and behold, I caught this wolf dog wearing a radio collar up in the Green River wilderness area, right on the boundary. So I immobilized that animal, took it out on an ATV along with a government trapper, laid it in the front seat of my pickup with its head resting on my legs, and drove it all the way down till I could use a cell phone, called Yellowstone, said, obviously this wolf must belong to you. They said, bring it. So I drove all the way around, came in the south entrance to Yellowstone, met a convoy of park rangers, and they checked the collar, and it was functioning, and it was one of these sawtooth wolves. So that was one of the wildest, unforgettable memories I have of that wolf. And there's even more to the story, which I'll let the readers read because it didn't end there. There was even more to it.
Is that something when you're writing a book like this, and I'll even say, when you're talking to someone like me or anybody else, to not give too much away when we're talking about the book, because obviously I always encourage anybody to read the books, and that's one of the things I like to do is to read and get the full story. But is there something about being an author that you take pride in, knowing that people have a yearning for stuff like this and wanting to learn more about the historical aspect and the on the ground things that happened that you couldn't talk about for so long?
Well, I've had so many adventures in my career. I think I could write 20 more books without really duplicating my stories. It's just shifting, from topic to topic, and focusing. Once you focus on a topic, then there's a whole bunch of stories within it because my career spans Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana, but also includes Washington, Oregon, and talking to folks in California and being on technical working group in Colorado. So I've got a tremendous amount of experience in the field, and my whole career, I call it, it's been very Western. It's just every time the phone rang, I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to be doing, what I was going to be dealing with, and and that's why I guess I love my career so much. It's just accepting the challenges and let them take you where they take you, and I always had really good results. In the end, I think the animals benefited, and so did the people.
There was one thing that caught my eye with the book. Um, I won't ask you the question of how many wolves survived out of the relocation effort. I guess we'll leave that for the readers to to do there. Um, Ultimately, there was something you put that say that these sawtooth wolves changed the character of Yellowstone wolves forever. What do you what do you mean by that, and where is there evidence that you can tell people about what you mean by that statement?
Yeah, it's I'm conveying a message from people like Dr. Doug Smith and
Mm.
Dan Staler, who's in the park now that Doug retired. Conversations with them have essentially concluded that the effort was worth it. What came from this effort was very beneficial to the park and to the legacy of wolves in the park. So I take their word for it, and in writing this book too, I was very involved in many aspects of the story I reveal. But again, once you hand the wolves off to other people and others take over the decision making, uh, it becomes their story. So I had to do a lot of cross checking with different individuals. And I learned a whole lot. I mean, I learned multiple factors that weren't really part of my story at the time that I thought, wow, I didn't know that. So you keep adding in things that I learned. And then there's been other books written about certain aspects of this story that I'm going back to those authors and share with them. I learned some things they don't know yet, that can help them update their material. Uh, so yeah, I learned a lot. So there's a lot of this book, it wasn't in my head, it was through research.
When you become a researcher after all the work that you've done, what does that do for you in your we were speaking prior to recording about your vigor, your reinvigoration to do this story because you had a discussion with someone that you spoke to in Idaho. When you get reinvigorated for something like this and you learn more, does you mentioned 20 more books. Um, does this give you the want to do this or continually do this on a regular basis? Or you think it's one of those things where the story has to hit you correctly?
Well, what I found out in doing the research for this book, and my others too, is that my memory is sharp. I remember all these things in detail, and then I call up people who are with me or people involved with me during all of these adventures, and they're just puzzled. They go, "I don't remember that." So I have to tell on some of my colleagues too. They go, "I don't have a clue. I don't remember. I don't remember that at all." And it's like, my God, you were with me. And well, I don't remember it. But my mental sharpness is, I can't put it in words. I mean, somebody mentioned something somewhere happened, and back to my old phrase, I'm the Forrest Gump of wolf recovery. There was almost nothing happened for the last, well, I retired in 2006, but going back 25 years before that, I remember every detail. And a lot of people will call up and say, "Are you aware of this, this, and this?" And I always tell them, "Yes, I was there. I did that." So that's the fun of telling these stories, is that I know the intimate details of the story and I was deeply involved in it. But I can tell you that it wears out editors like my lovely wife, Jenny. She knows these stories too ad nauseum, I think is be the word there. So I just want to share everything with everyone else, but you just can't do it. And it's very wearing and it's a lot of work. I mean, I never realized how much work writing a book is, and the dealing with your editors who just keep, chop, 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 they always give me the sign like they're going to cut my throat. And they have to, I have so much material, they have to whittle it down to the bare minimum, which sometimes hurts the author.
I can see that, especially putting it to a narrow focus. Is there something you can share about the other 10 wolves that we may not have discussed, that you want people who are going to pick this up and read, either about the overall story itself or about the processes that happen that maybe we didn't touch on? Something that you as the author and as the person who was there and worked with these wolves to ultimately get some of them to Yellowstone.
Well, I guess here today, I look at the contrast going on. You don't know what every single wolf has a potential to contribute to wolf recovery, contribute to genetic diversity, to write a unique story with its life and its existence. And that has always been important to me. And that's something I noticed, from doing all these wolf captures and relocations and trying to keep wolves alive. And the life of a wolf now has just been absolutely cheapened. They're treated like vermin in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. They're not appreciated any longer. They're just a species, and there's too many of them in there by their measure. So instead of seeing the unique contributions these wolves can make as sentient beings, the individuals making up the population, I just see the population being destroyed by recreational hunting and trapping now. It's kill as many as you can kill, and the states want them, Idaho, Montana want them down to about 450 wolves, so they want over half the population killed. So now it's simply commercial wolf killing is what it is. People are killing them for their fur, and there's bounties being paid for them. And and they're killing pups in dens. And so there's, to me, it's just become a total disrespect of the species, uh, which is total contrast with my philosophy about uh, looking at wolves for all of the positive values and the positive uh, impacts they can have on people. If you look at what's going on in Yellowstone, millions of people are enjoying them. But once you step out of the park, it's a meat grinder. And people are willing to, I'm not even hardly willing anymore to go to Yellowstone. I can't stand the wolf jams and the bear jams and, the traffic congestion and all that to see a wolf. I'd rather see one here in Idaho my way, going in on a pack. But the public wants, public's got 2 weeks vacation. I want to see Montana, I want to see Wyoming, and I want to see wolves, and I haven't got time to go looking for them anywhere. I want to go to the Lamar Valley. So that's the world we live in today, and I wish Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, all three would be the Lamar Valley. That's what it's capable of being, but not the way they're treated these days.
All fair points. And hopefully, stories like these and your other books and the stories that others have written will give people, the chance to want to do that, to go backpacking out, like you say, and try and find wolves. Maybe not in Yellowstone and in other places where they exist.
I think when you read the book too, you'll just see how the world inside Yellowstone is totally different than the world outside Yellowstone. I'll just leave it at that. But there's a tremendous contrast, and when people read this, they'll notice.
Absolutely will. And I want to give a shout out to Julie Argyle, who put the cover wolf for you, who is the wolf on the cover of the book, because that's an exceptional shot. Do you know who that wolf is on the front?
That's the Wapiti Lake alpha female. And again, without giving it away, it's really interesting. I reveal in there when the book was almost done. I mean, when I had pretty much figured it's all done, I went to International Wolf Conference in Minnesota about 3 years ago and went to an evening banquet, and I just sat with my mouth open. I was like, whoa, it's more of what I never knew I discovered there. And so I incorporate that little learning curve too with part of this book. So it's quite a story. And the story even got bigger and a little more involved than I even anticipated it would get.
I was there for that too. That was a great, that was Bob Landis showing that was unreal footage that he's been able to get over the course of the years. Carter, tell everybody the places where they can find the other 10 wolves and they can purchase it. And possibly, I don't know, are you still doing signed copies?
Yeah, CarterNiemeyer.com is, we have done very well with that. And that's you order it through PayPal or however, and then I sign them and we send them to you. We've been very successful with that the last couple of weeks. In fact, overwhelmed. We're just caught up. I got word, we haven't got down to the logistical details, but I understand that my book will be available inside Yellowstone in the bookstores now. We took that step and got the okay that we can move forward with hopefully book sales inside the park. And then you can go to Amazon, and I would encourage anybody that it would be helpful to all of us, I guess, go to your bookstores locally and ask for it. I can't think of the fancy number, but anyway, the code number for the book is at my website. If you ask for it through that, any bookstore should be able to order it. We've had inquiries already in the United Kingdom, France, and other places too now are interested in getting it, and there's a Amazon connection to those countries too. And probably within the month, we're going to do the audio version. So then all three of my books will be eventually audio, and what is it, Kimball. So you can read it or listen to it.
Well, here's the question with audio. Are you going to be reading all the books?
I am not going to be reading the books. I apologize to people. I've had numerous people ask and beg me to do this, but it takes a special studio, as you would well know. And you have to have that talent to roll along reading. I'm afraid I'd be caught up in bloopers that could take years to unravel. And I watched my reader, his name's Joe Golden, and he lives here in Boise. And with their studio, they have this unique ability to insert very minute little changes sometimes where they have make a mistake or a mispronunciation. But I'm afraid, like Peter Coyote and these other exceptional readers, I'm not in that league. So I'm going to go with Joe.
All right. Well, we'll wait for Joe for the audiobooks, for the Kindle and everything else. The other 10 Wolves, the Yellowstone backstory. As Carter said, I would go to his website, order from there. I got a copy fairly quickly, and again, we appreciate your efforts over the years, Carter, and the books that you've written, and it's just another wonderful story for people to have on their shelves and to relive the history of what's been going on. So I always appreciate your time, always appreciate your insight, and of course your candor. I really appreciate you, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to share some of my thoughts with the rest of society. And I think any author, at least at my level, I'm doing it to inspire others. I'm certainly not doing it to get rich, because writing books is not I wouldn't recommend it if, people think, oh, he must be making millions. And no, you don't make money writing books unless you're Stephen King or someone.
But either way, you're a good storyteller, and the stories that are, like you said, have been on the inside for quite some time, and now they're able to come to print. So it's great. Go get it along with Wolf and Wolfland. You won't be disappointed, I promise you. Carter Niemeyer, thanks again for your time and for all your stories. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, John. You have a good one too.
You too. Stay tuned while we just hang tight while we sign off. How's to y'all out there? We'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.